Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood under threat of being banned. After days of violence, the interim government says it's now discussing outlawing the group. But will the Brotherhood go quietly, or will any attempt to crush it lead to even more bloodshed? You're watching Inside Story. Hello, I'm Shihab Ratansi. After days of violence, Egypt's leaders are toughening their rhetoric against the Muslim Brotherhood. Interim Prime Minister Hassan al-Bolkiah has proposed dissolving the group. And if that happens, the Brotherhood will be forced to go back underground. Many fear they will have to embark on a path of armed resistance then. Some wonder whether that is the military's goal. More on that in a moment. But first, this report from Hashim Al-Bara.
Former political prisoner Mohammed Morsi inaugurated in 2012, the first democratically elected president in Egypt's history. For Morsi's supporters and his group, the Muslim Brotherhood, known as the Ikhwan, this was next to impossible only a few years ago. The Muslim Brotherhood was founded by this man, Hassan al-Banna, 85 years ago. Al-Banna had high hopes to spread Islamic principles and morals, but his ultimate goal was to establish a political system inspired by Sharia law. The Ikhwan soon became engaged in politics. Al-Banna created branches across the country and a paramilitary wing. The group was disbanded by the government and its leader assassinated in 1949. In 1952, the Muslim Brotherhood supported the military coup led by Gamal Abdel Nasser, but relations soon deteriorated and thousands of Muslim Brotherhood leaders and supporters were sent to jail. The group was forced to go underground. Persecuted and tortured, some of the Ikhwan leaders endorsed the use of violence against the government. A massive crackdown followed. It wasn't until the 1980s that the Ikhwan started to emerge from the shadow and take part in elections. Its members ran first as independents. Decades of discipline and charity work paid off, and their moment came in 2005 when they won roughly 20% of the seats in the parliament. President Mubarak was alarmed by the results. He launched a clampdown on the group. But Mubarak was toppled in a popular revolt in 2011. His overthrow ushered in a new era for the Muslim Brotherhood. The Ikhwan formed a new party, the Freedom and Justice. Along with the Salafist Noor Party, they won nearly 70% of the seats in the People's Assembly. But the Ikhwan soon found themselves accused of undermining democracy. Even their closest allies, the Salafists, abandoned them. On July the 3rd, the army deposed President Morsi following days of massive anti-Ikhwan protests. Defiant, the Muslim Brotherhood staged mass rallies calling for Morsi to be reinstated. A new showdown between Egypt's long-time antagonists, the Ikhwan, and the military. The Muslim Brotherhood took to the streets here in Rab'a al-Adawiyya and Nahda squares, where tens of thousands gathered for days denouncing the army. Clerics and religious leaders sided with the Ikhwan. The liberals and the seculars supported the military takeover. On the streets, the divide was growing, and so were fears of more violence. And this is exactly what happened when security forces broke the Muslim Brotherhood sit-ins. Hundreds were killed and thousands arrested. Despite international condemnations, the Egyptian government said it's determined to eradicate what it describes as terrorism. For the Muslim Brotherhood, it's yet another ordeal. Now, it remains to be seen whether the most popular and organized Islamist party in the Arab world will go underground once again or simply concede defeat for the time being. Hashim Al-Bara for Inside Story.
And let's bring in our guests. In London, we have Mona al-Qazzaz, a Muslim Brotherhood spokesperson. Wael Nawara is an Egyptian writer and activist and a co-founder of the opposition al-Dastur party. He joins us on Skype from Cairo. Also in Cairo, Robert Fisk, foreign correspondent for the British newspaper The Independent. So on Saturday, we have reports that the Egyptian Prime Minister, Beblawi, is proposing the legal dissolution of the Muslim Brotherhood, and there are reports that the government is studying the idea. But then also on Saturday, we have this statement from a government spokesperson.
We're not into the effort of dissolving anyone or preventing anyone from being active in the public domain, but we're trying to make sure that everyone is legalized according to what the Egyptian law says.
So that was an interesting statement. Robert Fisk, what did you make of that? Is there some sort of legal avenue that the military is considering to dissolve but not dissolve the Muslim Brotherhood?
Well, they could always keep the party legal, freedom and justice, and get rid of the Brotherhood. But, you know, I think all this is a bit ridiculous. I remember very well when the British government decided to ban the IRA, but the IRA did not go away. I don't think banning or dissolving parties really works. Any intelligence officer, not that I've met many who are intelligent, will tell you that the first thing you don't want to do if you're worried about some kind of opposition is to ban it. Now, if the Egyptians do that, however, it allows them to continue. To provoke the opposition. We may suddenly find there are mysterious acts of terrorism in Cairo, explosions, which we'll all be told it was the work of the Brotherhood. And then, of course, the state of emergency can be continued in Egypt. Our generals and armies like states of emergency, as we know. It all sounds rather bad to me, but a bit squalid in the sense that if such a huge majority of Egyptians are against the Brotherhood, what are they worried about? They're obviously not going to get many seats in Parliament in another election, are they? Or is the fear that they might?
Well, we'll develop some of those ideas in a moment. But Mona al-Qazzaz, what's your sense? The idea that we were getting was because this idea was being referred to the Ministry of Social Affairs, this is primarily about removing the Muslim Brotherhood's non-governmental organisation status. Is that your sense of what's going on, perhaps, or being considered?
So to be clear, this is not a government, this is not a regime, this is a mafia. They suspended the constitutions, they hijacked the democratic institutions of Egypt, and they are calling themselves the leaders of the country. They failed at every single democratic process, and they came on the back of the tanks as leaders. Obviously, their disbandment is the disbanding of the Brotherhood is equivalent to their legitimacy. They are illegitimate. This is an illegitimate mafia that has hijacked the power of Egypt, and there is through a military coup, and there's a blood of Egyptian citizens, hundreds and thousands of Egyptian citizens on their hands, and they will have to pay the price of their crimes against humanity. They are the illegal people. We have won at every single democratic process. We have won over and over again, and they have lost. And the only way for them to be back in the political arena is through the power of the bullets and tanks.
Well, Nawara, I mean, that is a point that needs to be addressed. Under what authority, if the government is considering the dissolution of the Muslim Brotherhood, would this administration do so, given that it came to power through a coup and any sort of constitutionality has been suspended?
I think there's a lot of confusion in the Western mind. Is Muslim Brothers has already been dissolved, or was dissolved a long time ago in 1948 after assassinating judges and prime minister and so on. And since then it was never resurrected. What happened in 2011, that Freedom and Justice Party was registered as a party, and I think this was a kind of a test for everybody, is will the Muslim Brothers be able to make the transition which you talked about between IRA and, for example, Sinn Féin, or a legitimate political party. And to that extent, they did win elections in the parliament and in the presidents. Also, they got 25% in the first round, they get 51% in the second round against Mubarak's prime minister, Shafiq. So clearly, it wasn't. Morsi did not really get the kind of majority which the Muslim Brothers claim. Nevertheless, Egyptians, after the elections, they give him every chance to work. But
I think we're getting a little off topic. With respect, I mean, the Muslim Brotherhood, you say, was already dissolved. I mean, clearly that isn't true. I mean, we have a representative of the Muslim Brotherhood on this program right now.
Well, it was dissolved in 1948 and was never resurrected again. And in fact, the Muslim Brothers is a illegal underground organization. It has no standing in Egypt. It has no registry.
It's registered as a non-governmental association, organization.
There was a dummy NGO registered in 2013, but it does not own the companies which the Muslim Brothers own. It does not have any authority. The Muslim Brothers continue to work as an underground organization, and although there was a Freedom and Justice Party formed as a independent political party, yet all the decisions were coming from the Muslim Brothers Bureau, which does not have any standing, does not have any legal or legitimate or elected standing. In fact, many of the assistants of Morsi resigned last year, saying that they have resigned because they did not know who was taking the decisions.
Mona al-Qazzaz, what do you represent exactly? When we say you're a spokesperson from the Muslim Brotherhood, then?
His arguments are completely baseless. The 99.9% mentality he's preaching about is not democracy. A democracy is that half of the people agree for something and the other half of the people agree for something else. And there's a political process in place for people to discuss things, but they don't try to impose things using the power of the bullets and tanks. What they've did is that they failed every time, at every round in a democratic process. They failed at 5 different rounds of elections, and then now they're coming back as leaders on the back of the tanks. What legitimacy does al-Baradei, the leader of the Dastur party, his party, Mr. Nawara's party, what legitimacy does he have? He came as a leader on the back of the tanks, and now al-Baradei is actually fleeing the country. He's fleeing back to Austria after crushing the democratic process in Egypt and taking the country down a very dark tunnel. He's fleeing after crushing every democratic institution we've put in place. The fractured and failed opposition Mr. Nawara is representing actually failed every time. Every time we bring up a democratic process, they fail every time. And the only way for them, they have blood on their hands now, and they're trying to flee away, trying to run away from the actual situation now. Egypt now is in a very dangerous situation. There are hundreds and thousands of Egyptians killed on the streets just because they couldn't play politics, and they only played on the back. They only played the power of the weapons.
Robert Fisk, help us understand this statement, though, or this line of thinking, that the Muslim Brotherhood isn't a legitimate force in Egyptian politics, isn't overground. It remains an underground, rather shadowy, perhaps criminal organisation. That seemed to be what Wael Nawara was going, or was getting at, rather.
Well, I think you see that the Egyptian press, which has gone back to being as toadyish as it was under Mubarak, is now pushing the line, which the government loves, that essentially the Brotherhood is a vast terrorist conspiracy. I notice the phrase that's being used in all the papers today as a malicious terrorist conspiracy, as opposed to the non-malicious version, I suppose. You know, what they're trying to do is to de-Egyptianize the Brotherhood, in a sense say these are not our citizens, these are not our people. And the problem, I think it's quite clear, is that there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands or millions of supporters, sympathisers, members of the Brotherhood. You can't send them all underground. You can't send them all to prison. You can't open vast prison camps, which they did in Algeria when they suspended elections in 1992. I think I rather get the impression, watching the army physically on the streets, and I'm on the streets of Cairo, that the army hasn't really worked out what it's going to do next. And I have a feeling that these decisions, you know, shall we dissolve the Brotherhood? No, we won't. Maybe we will dissolve the Brotherhood. These are being taken in, you know, a few seconds of conversation. There doesn't seem to be a real plan. If the Brotherhood is put underground, if we actually have violence coming from underground, whoever we blame it on, then the state of emergency continues, then there will be no rewriting of the Constitution, then there will be no more elections.
Right.
Or we can have a series of fake elections like Mubarak had.
But Robert, I mean, that's precisely why some are wondering whether there is a plan, and that is the plan. It is to drive the Muslim Brotherhood underground, force it, or at least its supporters, into a campaign of violence, and then strip it of any national and international political legitimacy it might have, because the military is more comfortable fighting a terrorist organisation, in quotes, than a democratic organisation. Yeah,
but the thing is this, if the violence comes from the Brotherhood, now we know from the Mubarak regime that many attacks that took place, especially on Christian churches at that time, we were meant to think it was the Brotherhood or some form of Islamist organisation. But there has been increasing suspicions in the aftermath of the January-February 2011 revolution that it was Mubarak's own own security cops who were doing this. And you've got to remember, when we're talking about, you know, states of emergency and people going underground, that the security forces don't really even deserve the word security. They are, in fact, the only people really shooting down large numbers of people in the streets. They and the Beltagi, the government is actively, openly using, and I see it with my own eyes, the drug addicts who are paid by the security people to go on the streets and shoot demonstrators. They're walking around with clubs on the 6th of October bridge the other night when I went home after curfew from the Al Jazeera office here in this building. We've got to realise what we're dealing with here. This isn't a stable constitutional government that actually really believes in the rule of law. There is no law. That's the problem. When the police on the top of the Ramsey Street police station started shooting at cars on the airport road, and one bullet went between me and my driver when we were standing in the road, and my goodness me, he ran away quickly. That was not the forces of law and order, that was the force of anarchy. And the man who fired that shot was a police officer in police uniform wearing a hood on the top of the Ramsey Street police station.
Mona al-Qazzaz, as a spokesperson for the Muslim Brotherhood, may I ask you then, if the Muslim Brotherhood was to be dissolved or outlawed in some fashion, would the Muslim Brotherhood then feel that the only option was armed struggle?
We are peaceful. We have been peaceful. For decades, we have been peaceful. Our peacefulness has always been our pragmatic and our moral obligation. We are peaceful and will continue in our peaceful protest against this military regime. For us, it's not about the Muslim Brotherhood anymore. It's about the free Egyptians. This criminal military junta has hijacked the power in Egypt, and they are committing massacres and mass killing against innocent Egyptians. They've taken the democratic institutions from us. They've taken our dream from us as a free and democratic Egypt.
To armed struggle, though, despite those peaceful credentials, they have taken up arms in the past. The question is whether the military is trying to goad them into doing so once again. If
I may correct you, please. We have never taken up any weapons. We've always denounced any form of violence. I personally would never stand up for an organization that has ever been violent. We are a peaceful organization, but let me bring you back again to the point that we have taken it through politics. We wanted change to Egypt, and we had a political plan for the Egyptians, which the Egyptians have chosen from over five different rounds of elections. The problem is that the violence is coming from the other side.
Wael Nawara, what do you make of this theory, then, that the military is trying to force the Muslim Brotherhood, or at the very least those who are sympathetic to the Muslim Brotherhood, into some armed struggle so they can reframe this into a war against terror, George W. Bush's great gift to most authoritarian regimes around the world, because they're more comfortable, frankly. They would be more comfortable in that scenario than they are in the current scenario.
In fact, we have to recount the events. Mr. Morsi did not win elections against Mubarak. It was the Egyptian people who came out in 2011 and removed Mubarak and forced the army to a roadmap of democratic transformation. So in the beginning, the SCAF, in fact, allied with the Muslim Brothers. So there was no question.
It's difficult to discuss this. It's difficult to discuss this if the starting point is that there was no democratic election in the first place.
I noticed that you interrupt me and not interrupt the other guests. So if you,
go ahead,
I can happily.
I just assumed our starting point was there was a democratic election.
The starting point that the SCAF was blamed by Egyptians for allying with the Muslim Brothers and allowing them to write the roadmap alone, and giving its credibility behind the referendum, which Mona is referring to, in 19th of March 2011. And that was the real reason that people voted for this, because of the military gave it its support. So there's no question that the military was against the MB. They gave them every opportunity. They gave them and other Islamist factions, they gave them the opportunity to clean up their act. But the MB wanted to have both worlds. They wanted to be legitimate and run the country, but in the same time continue its underground organization, continue its money laundering operations, continue having militias, continue its meddling in syndicates, continue abusing religions and abusing mosques. Can I just continue, please?
I can't take those accusations.
Please let Wael Nawara finish.
You can continue. You talked for minutes. I did not.
Go ahead, Mr. Nawara.
So
it's just because your accusations are baseless.
Mona, please.
You can say that in your slot, please. Okay. So the Muslim Brothers had every opportunity to make that transition. However, they did not make that transition. They killed 4 of my personal friends. I was shot at on 5th of December. Mrs. Mona says that she doesn't know that the Muslim Brothers are taking arms. They took arms against us on the 5th of December. I was shot at myself. 3 of my friends who were admins of the Facebook group Muslim Brothers were liars, were killed between December and January. So the Muslim Brothers proved themselves to continue their pre-Mubarak operations, being a secret organization wanting to have both worlds, making the laws and breaking the laws. And this, of course, will give them unprecedented competitive advantage over their party, over the other political parties. Nobody can ever win against the mafia. Imagine if the mafia in the United States or in Britain, they were allowed to form political parties, own companies, have syndicates, unions, extortion people. You will never be, no political party can ever compete against them. That's why
can't the same be said about the military in Egypt, by the way, if we're talking about business interests and syndicates?
The military did not run the country for the past year when Morsi was in power.
That's a whole different show, I think.
It was Morsi who was running the country, and it was his cabinet was running the country. And in fact, right now we have the head of the Supreme Constitutional Court, who's the president, and he is the president of the country, and Sisi is only the Ministry of Defense, and we have Minister of Defense, and we have a roadmap whereby after this roadmap, after elections,
and how many votes did those people win?
Can I just continue?
So the head of the Constitutional Court,
the
head of the Constitutional Court, who was supposed to protect the Constitution, is the first to turn his back against it. Those people are appointed by a military junta, and you're cheerleading. It's actually quite sad. Sorry,
if I could just have a moment, we do want to hear what you both.
Please allow me to interject.
We would like to hear what you both want to say, but it's easier if you both speak one at a time. Mr. Nawar, may I ask a question though? I mean, it's clear though that you have no trust in the Muslim Brotherhood's ability to enter the democratic process.
Can the Muslim Brothers now walk in the streets of Cairo without being attacked by its residents of every neighborhood?
But I'm wondering,
the Muslim Brothers have been voted down on June 30th. They have been impeached. Morsi has been impeached, and he was asked, in fact, to hold early elections. Why didn't, if he believes so much in elections, why didn't he hold early elections?
Mr. Nawara, we're running out of time, but may I just ask you then, is it then your belief, do you think it's the belief of some in the military then, that now at last it's time to crush the Muslim Brotherhood? This isn't really part of forcing them into armed struggle simply to let them lose their democratic legitimacy. It's to push them into armed struggle to crush them once and for all, even though all of General al-Sisi's predecessors have failed in such a plan.
I don't think that, I think you have seen yesterday how the military, in fact, was protecting the Muslim Brothers inside al-Fatah. In fact, the Muslim Brothers are now facing the anger of the Egyptian people. I hope that they have a younger generation who can come out and clean up their act, stop this clandestine operations, focus on only one domain. You cannot own companies and at the same time operate a political party. If you want to be a political party, you have to dispose of your militias, you have to dispose of your alliances with the terrorists. Remember, Mr. Biltagi came out saying the minute that Morsi will be reinstated, all the terrorist attacks will be stopped. For 45 days, they were threatening Christians from the stage of Rabaa al-Adawiyya that we will burn all the churches in Egypt, we will burn the entire Egypt if Morsi is not reinstated. Mubarak was removed by the people, and Morsi was removed by the people. And in both cases, the military played a role in running the transition. And in fact, it was the military who gave power to Morsi last year, exactly 1 year ago.
Robert Fisk, we only have about 30 seconds left. What about the comparison to Algeria, another military intervention into the democratic process? Lots of differences, but are there similarities? That, of course, led to a protracted civil war in which hundreds of thousands died. Could you even see that possibility now in Egypt?
No, I don't. 250,000 was the figure of fatalities in Algeria. I covered the Algerian war between the Islamists and the government, or the pouvoir. Algeria has a long history of savage struggle, particularly against the French, just as the Palestinians did against the British and as the Lebanese, or Syrians as they were then, did against the French. But this country is not a violent country. Egypt has never gone through so savage a period in history, not at least for 300 years. I don't think Egyptian people actually see violence as an alternative to politics, where I think they did in Algeria, and I think in other parts of the Levant they did when they were effectively under colonization. So I think Egypt will not have a civil war, though I am appalled to hear General al-Sisi suggesting that that's a danger. I don't think it is, and I don't think he really believes it is either.
All right, we'll leave it there. Robert Fisk in Cairo, thank you very much. In London, Mona al-Qazzaz, and Wael Nawara, also in Cairo. Thank you very much for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. And if you want to send us your feedback, just email your thoughts to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'm Shihab Ratansi. Thanks for watching. Goodbye for now.